Welcome to Downshift. My name is Matt and I have spent the week with Ford's F-150 Lightning, and you'll all know that this is their electric version of their top-selling F-150. And it's got loads more competition than it did when it first came out. The Sierra, Silverado EV, Hummer EV, and Tesla Cybertruck. But with all those rivals in context, this is the most normal, just pickup truck that happens to be electric. So I'm going to show you the 18 things that you need to know about the F-150 Lightning. Let's get into it. So what's new then for 2025? Well, actually, let's go back a year and talk about 2024, because that introduced the flash trim, which is actually what we have here. And it's got a big vertical screen, it's got a bigger battery pack, and it's got Blue Cruise and a 360 camera, and a bunch of the goodies that you would probably want. So this is almost like the highlight reel of just frequently optioned packages, and Ford put it in a trim. But then talking of power and performance, there's two power levels. The base is 452 horsepower, and 775 pound-feet of torque. You can go up to 580 horsepower and you get the same 775 pound-feet of torque, and 0 to 60 then is done in under 4 seconds, so it's not like it's slow. And there's also two different battery packs that you can get. The base is a 98 kilowatt-hour battery, and it's good for about 230 miles of range. We have the upgraded 131 kilowatt-hour battery pack, which is good for 320 miles of advertised range, but not in weather like this. We actually did our Lakeshore loop efficiency test, and this thing came back with 2 miles per kilowatt hour at about 21 degrees ambient temperature, which translates to a workable range of 260 miles on a full charge. And then there's the charging, and the big news is now you can charge your Lightning at Tesla plugs. You can also operate it with Tesla's plug-and-charge capability, so it's super easy once you have your account set. Just pull up and then plug the car in, and it'll start charging. And Ford's native route planning service now works to include Tesla superchargers, so range anxiety is a little bit less now. But then speaking of drivetrain, you get dual motor all-wheel drive as standard, which is great when it dumps snow the day before you want to film. And then in terms of weight and dynamics, this thing's about 7,000 pounds, which makes it a full ton lighter than the Hummer EV. It doesn't have leaf springs, and it has an independent rear suspension, which is different than the gas F-150. And the interesting thing is, there's no drive sound, so this thing is actually super quiet and relaxing to drive around. We'll talk about that more a little bit later. And then when it comes to styling, this is kind of the Lightning's thing. It just kind of looks like a normal F-150. Now, I say that for the most part, because there are things that give it away. Of course, like you get full width LED running bar, which obviously you don't have in the normal F-150. Each grade kind of sort of has its own unique grille, but you've got front recovery hooks up front. We'll talk about the frunk in a second. We'll come around to the sunny side of the car, and you do see that you have a front fender designation with your trim for the flash, and it's outlined in that Ford blue, which is really kind of cool. You've got unique and specific wheels and tires for your Lightning, which are kind of the ones that we had in the previous years. You've got running boards involved, you've got typical Ford dipped window, which helps for visibility, and on the other side, right about here, is where you plug in the truck. But from the profile, you can see that it is just a normal F-150. And then you get to the back of the tailgate, and you see that you've got a Lightning designation, again, with kind of like the Zappy blue lettering surrounding. You've got the Zappy America badge on the back gate. But other than that, you wouldn't be able to tell that this isn't a normal F-150. Now in your flash, you don't have the full width LED tail bar, but you can get that in the upper trims. So overall, it's pretty incognito. And we'll talk about the front. There's an offset button here on the front of the truck. I'm gonna give this thing a little bit of a hand because I don't know if it's iced over, but you've got this really big opening that you can just easily load stuff in. It's about 11 cubic feet of space, maybe a little bit more, which makes it the biggest in the class. And there's loads of practicality in here. You've got tie downs in here, 4 of them. You've got grocery bag hangers, 4 of those as well. You've got some LED lighting that you can control. There's additional storage for your charging cables. It's got 400 pounds of weight, so you can sit up here if you're tailgating or whatever. It says Ford up here, and one of the coolest things is you've got 2.4 kilowatts of max offboarding of power, so you can charge really anything up here. This is just kind of nice. If you run out of space or you don't want to put stuff in the open bed, you don't have a tonneau cover, this is a great place to put stuff. So I really, really like the frunk here. Super usable, great space, and loads of features in the Lightning's frunk. And then around the other end of the truck, there's the normal tailgate. Now this Flash has a bed utility package, and we've got a powered tailgate that goes up and down. Super, super nice. But again, bed utility package gets you the typical Ford step. My fingers are frozen, and it's gonna hurt if I open that, but I do have B-roll. You've got clamps that you can put here, the ruler in centimeters and inches. You've got little almost cup holders, place to put pencils, bottle openers. I mean, all of the usual practical F-150 stuff is back here. Now, all of the Lightnings are the crew cab configuration with the 5.5-foot bed. So if you want a longer bed, you're a little bit out of luck. But here, it's still pretty practical. You've got tie downs up here. You've got a little compartment over here for I don't know what, bed liner, spray in, and here we've got our Pro Power on board with our 240-volt spinning attached outlet. Really, really handy. This is going to be great for work sites, for campsites. You've got LED lights back here, and it's really, really quite nice. Payload capacity, about 1,800 pounds, just a little bit less for our big battery here. If you want to go for the smaller battery, which you can, that'll up your payload capacity to just under 2,000 pounds, which is, again, quite nice. We'll lift up the tailgate, if I can find it with my frozen fingers, and then we'll talk about the towing capacity because it's 10,000 pounds. And then moving up, finally I get to be in the cabin. Now one of the things you notice, we don't have window shades back here. I don't totally expect that. Pretty typical F-150, but might be kind of nice. But here, pretty typical F-150 stuff again. A little bit of a cup holder, storage, 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 and then a huge, huge back seat. We don't have a panel roof. You can get that if you want to spend a little bit more. We also don't have the rear window that opens. You can spend a little bit more and get that. But we do have the seats that lift up, so you can turn this into a nice and practical storage area. But the rest of it is just kind of classic F-150. It's huge. I've got plenty of knee room, loads of headroom, especially without the panoramic roof. And over here, we do have cup holders, a place for your phone, chargers, 12-volt USB-C, and then a normal household outlet. We've got vents back here. And if you want to spend, again, some more money, you can get heated back seats. So overall, really comfortable and spacious rear seat in the Lightning. And the front seats in our Flash, as you can see, we have the kind of fabric upholstery up here, so not the leather, but again, if you want to spend some more money, you can get that. But here we do have 3-level heated seats, and we have a heated steering wheel. Again, if you want to spend some more money, you can get cooled seats, some memory seats, and all that. But overall, it's pretty comfortable here, and you can still control the pedals if you want to dial in your perfect seating position. So I do not have a problem with this, especially because these fabric seats heat up nice and fast. Same with the steering wheel in weather like this. And as we talk about the cabin experience as a whole, again, this is kind of the Lightning thing. It just is a normal F-150 for everything aside from the huge vertically oriented screen. Now this of course has everything kind of built into it. We'll talk technology and apps and that sort of thing a little bit later, but your climate controls are worked into the screen here, but they've done it a little bit more cleverly than they did the first year. Of course you've got things like your temperature and your, max heating and cooling of the front windows. You've got your buttons for heated seat here and heated steering wheel. But when you do go to adjust the temperature, you can then use the center dial, which used to just be volume, to do things like adjust your heated seat or things like that. So that they've added some functionality in for these last few years since last time we were in an F-150, but the rest of it is just Ford F-150 ergonomics. Double glove box, chargers everywhere, storage everywhere, huge storage and capability. We've got the gear selector that folds down and the desk that folds out. The world's largest steering wheel, but overall it just kind of works. The ergonomics work, the materials are decent, and there's practicality and usability and features everywhere. And as we start to talk about the more detailed tech stuff, you don't have a head-up display. I can't really actually remember if we had a head-up display in the Platinum that we drove in the past, but you do have a fully digital instrument cluster that you can totally customize to see whatever you want to see through these little buttons here on the steering wheel. Again, we got truck info, you can see where you're recouping and deploying power, and we've got a custom My View, so really anything that you want to see, you can see it there. But again, the big difference between this and a normal F-150 is the big vertical screen. Now, some people will like to have more physical tactility in a conventional F-150, but this is the more futuristic version, the electric truck. And it's an enormous vertical screen. You have wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, something that you can't take for granted, and you don't have on the Silverado EV. You've also got great 360 cameras, which work super well. And the nice thing here is you can control every little aspect of everything. It's a little bit overwhelming when you first get into the truck, but you've got stuff like your charging screen, so you can see when and how much you want to charge. You've got your onboard scales to see how much payload you've got left. You got your Pro Power on board, so you can send power to different parts of the truck. Zone lighting, so you can use this thing as basically like a campsite or a big, huge mobile flashlight. You've got your smart hitch, and you can even record feedback about your experience and send it back to Ford so they can make improvements for the future, like stuff like this, when you can adjust this. They didn't have this when this first came out. Maybe somebody recorded some feedback, sent it to Ford, and now they've implemented it. Really, really nice. So overall, I don't really have an issue with the technology, and you've got a little public charging screen so you can figure out where the nearest charger is, and it includes Tesla chargers, and those are generally pretty reliable. So between that and the non-Tesla infrastructure, you'd probably be okay as far as range anxiety. But let's say you do need to charge out in the wild and you can't do it at home. You've got apps to keep you busy. You've got YouTube built in. Of course, you can set up a data plan for this. It'll cost you some money, but you could do it. But you've got different games in here. So you've got jigsaw puzzles, Sudoku, a driving game, and a sketch pad. So there's loads of stuff to keep you occupied, and of course you've got your phone with you, but just kind of nice that Ford has built in some stuff to help you pass the time if you end up charging on the road. And the last thing that we'll talk about before we go for a drive is, of course, price. Now, a Pro trim, I believe, starts at about $50,000, but if you want a more normal pedestrian trim or more normal person's everyday truck trim, you can go for an XLT, which starts at $63,000. As tested, we're here in the Flash with several options, and we're testing it just over $81,000. And the Platinum, the topped out spec, starts at $85,000, so we're not too far off of it. But that makes this then one of the vehicles on the road that's gotten cheaper as it's been out. And you compare it to things like the Silverado and the Sierra EV, even the Hummer and the Cybertruck, they all cost more. So this is actually a pretty good value. So let's talk about that a little bit more behind the wheel. Hey guys, real quick, Matt here. Just wanted to say I hope you've been enjoying the video. If you have, would really appreciate you hitting that subscribe button. I know it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it does go a long way in helping us get access to cars sooner and get access to manufacturer engineers so we can get more information on the cars and get you more information so you can make better decisions. So we really appreciate you hitting that subscribe, like, comment, the whole YouTube thing. But with that, let's get back to the video. Behind the wheel of the F-150, we're not going to launch in sport mode because obviously you can see the roads in front of us, but look, I really like this thing, I'm going to be honest. There's pretty much everything about that I just kind of like. We spent a bunch of time in, other EVs, even the Silverado EV most recently, and it was good. But there's just something like kind of natural and like organic feeling getting behind the wheel of this. Is just, it looks like an F-150. On the interior, it looks like an F-150. It's a ton lighter than in the Silverado EV. I remember driving the Silverado EV on this road, and I would get to this corner and the one up there, kind of 90-degree right-hand turns and left-hand turns, and I was like, oh, okay, well, I need to do more braking because the weight is overwhelming those front tires. So this feels like a much more manageable, much more realistic, just kind of better truck. Now, obviously, there's going to be trade-offs and things like you're going to get a little bit less range. And in the winter, in the cold, just classic EV stuff, you are going to get a little bit less range. A little bit, depending on exactly what type of driving you're doing. Now, we've talked about that a little bit before, but just overall, the thing that stood out to me is just how easy it was to get in this thing and just have it feel normal. Like if you're a truck owner, or even not, if you've just come from like a normal automobile, not like a Tesla or a Rivian. This was one of the big things that I complained about in the Rivian a few weeks ago, is you got in there and it was just a frustrating learning curve. I mean, the vents didn't have toggles in it. You had to use the steering wheel to adjust your mirrors and your tilt and telescope on the steering wheel. It was just like, it was something that you would maybe probably get used to. You would certainly get used to, and it's some of that stuff is like a set it and forget it kind of thing, and it's tied to your key, and I get all that stuff. But just from somebody that's wanting to get into a new electric vehicle or just want to try it, it's really kind of intimidating and overwhelming, and this removes all of that. The only thing that's different between this and a normal F-150 from a user experience perspective is just the screen. It's bigger, more stuff is in the screen, but all of the stuff is kind of in the same place. Your climate is always here at the bottom. It just kind of works really, really well. Obviously, you have the whole like charging thing, and there's that, but it's just, I think what Ford has done here is they've done it really cleverly. They just built an F-150 and then just made it electric. You know, they didn't go crazy with the styling, they didn't go crazy with an enormous battery pack, 200 kilowatt hours, GM. So it's not almost 10,000 pounds, it's just a much more reasonable 7,000 pounds, and that makes it drive better on the road. You get independent rear suspension, it's not leaf spring, so this thing rides really well. It's really comfortable, and it's really pretty relaxing. And here in the snow, I've been really impressed with it. It was snowing like all day yesterday. That's where all this stuff came from. There was no snow on the ground yesterday, and that's where all this stuff has come from. And I went out to test this thing, and I mean, I could have driven way more recklessly and been safe than I was. And I was still, you know, way more confident, way more planted than seemingly everybody else on the road. So it's pretty good. I mean, there's not really much of it. Okay, so it's a little bit less powerful than the rest of them. There's a little bit less range than some of the rest of them, but it's kind of marginal. And in terms of power, like, you're still doing 0 to 60 in this flash with the bigger battery pack and the bigger power in under 4 seconds. Like, how much faster do you need to do 0 to 60 in your pickup truck, realistically? It's just kind of good. I gotta be honest, it's just kind of good. It does everything. I love the Pro Power on board. I love just kind of the normal truck features that you can get here. It's cool. It's not overly gimmicked. It just works. So thank you to Ford for letting me have a go once again in your Lightning. It's been a couple of years, and you've made some good updates. And thank you to you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.